Dolatabadi. I'm a computer science and Spanish major at the University of Alabama. My PI's name is Dr. Bryan Koronkiewicz in the Department of Modern Languages and Classics, and you're watching RRS Live. More specifically, individual differences and task complexity factors in L2 writing, performance, and processes. Okay, so we're going to start with some background on working memory and CAF measures. So what is working memory? So specifically, working memory is this limited capacity neurological system in your brain that stores, holds, and manipulates information. There's this model that sort of describes this, which is the Baddeley working memory model. And it has this central executive that manages other dependent components that pick up information like phonological information, physical information, spatial information. And the reason why this is important to us is because in studies of native speakers of a given language, we notice that working memory is a vital part of language processing and written composition. And here's sort of a figure of what the Baddeley working memory model looks like. We have that central executive. It communicates with an episodic buffer, which is then attached to a visual spatial sketchpad, which manages visual, spatial, and motoric data. And then more important to us is the phonological loop, which manages things that are related to language like speech and reading. And eventually you can commit these things into long-term memory. Okay, and CAF measures. So when I talk about CAF measures, CAF stands for complexity, accuracy, and fluency. And when I talk about complexity, I'm specifically talking about structural complexity, i.e. how diverse are the structures that the participant is using. Accuracy is grammatical accuracy. That is, when the participant is trying to speak using novel grammatical structures, are they using them accurately? Are they being understood? And fluency is about fluidity of speech or composition. So, you know, if I trip and stumble over my words a lot and there are a lot of pauses in my speech, then probably my fluency score wouldn't be very high. And the importance of this particular set of measures to us is that, you know, there's a paper titled Manchon et al. That found that working memory for second language learners of Spanish had no independent effect at all on written language production. And instead, proficiency, which is measured by those CAF measures, is a much better standalone predictor of performance. So what we want to ask is, does task complexity play a role in written performance? And if we have these two conditions, a simple and a complex written condition, does written performance differ between the two tasks? And if we collect a set of individual measures, such as working memory measures, language proficiency measures, do those predict the data from the writing, the CAF measures that we get from the writing? Okay, now we'll talk about the experimental design. And this study was broken up into two sessions. So we had a session one, which was the written language portion, where the participants wrote 2 essays. They had one complex prompt and they had one simple prompt. And the order of these 2 prompts was randomized. So each one of these essays was 30 minutes long. And essentially, you know, they were able to stop whenever they wanted. They could write down when they stopped, and they had a break in between. But after each essay, they also had a post-essay questionnaire that measured how difficult the task was, which sorts of structures they were using, whether they used an outline, etc. Additionally, I should probably state here that we were taking their keystroke data as an additional measure. And here's what that prompt looks like. This is specifically the simple prompt, and as you can see, we give the participants plenty of different things to talk about, which we think won't constrain their working memory resources quite as much. The complex task just doesn't include any of this, and as a result, we think that during the complex task, the participants are going to have to expend more working memory resources working on outlining the essay in their head. So session 2 is specifically about assessing the participant on a series of 7 tests. First, we test them on working memory. And this was just a how many digits can you remember in a row test. We had a language proficiency examination, a language agnostic language proficiency examination, which was a test battery of 4 tests called the llama tests. And this is in just funny made-up words. It's checking to see how good you can how easily you can learn a language. We had a Spanish comprehension / closed questionnaire, which we handed out via Qualtrics, and we also had a demographic questionnaire. Okay, and how did we analyze this data? So we threw all of that assessment data, the questionnaire responses, and then also CAF measures that we got from analyzing the writing data using some computational tools. And we threw them all into a master CSV file. And we threw them into R, and we used tidyverse to analyze the data by running Pearson correlations and creating some violin plots. And specifically, when I talk about those CAF measures, you can see all of those measures on the screen right now, but they fall into 3 separate categories, really. We have lexical diversity, accuracy, and syntactic complexity. So I think probably the only term that I need to describe on this slide is what a T-unit is, which is a main clause with a bunch of other clauses attached to it. So obviously, that and all of the other measures on that chunk tied to syntactic complexity, the higher each one of those things is, the higher the syntactic complexity. Same thing with lexical diversity. For example, Giro's index is specifically measuring like token richness. So if you have a higher Giro index, you'll have a higher lexical diversity. The only negative correlation we would expect to see is with accuracy, because all of those measures are about error per 100 words. So somebody with a higher number of errors per every 100 words will probably, not be as proficient. And so we're going to run a series of Pearson correlations between the CAF measures and the individual measures, and also visualize the task differences using violin plots. And here are our results. So this is our data, and for the Pearson correlations, there are a couple of things that I think are of note. First off, our Spanish proficiency assessment aligns pretty well with the lexical diversity measures highlighted in orange, which tells us that, because they're correlated, we must have been doing something right. 2, the error-based accuracy measures that are highlighted in blue all show negative correlations with high proficiency scores. That's also good. We expect that. And 3, in general, a lot of these correlations are rather weak. We're going to look at that later with the violin plots. Here, with the complex task, we can see there's really one thing that I want to point your attention to, which is that dependent to all ratio measure alongside the working memory. So mainly, we see the dependent clause length ratio become moderately correlated with the working memory measures, which that supports the hypothesis that the complex task expended more working memory resources. Here we can see the lexical diversity is generally similar across both tasks on the first violin plot, not surprising. The accuracy is also similar. And for syntactic complexity, again, we can see that the dependent to all ratio violin plots, for the complex task, the plot is wider, noticeably, than the simple task. And for our next steps, we're going to further examine the written data. We also have a partner project for second language learners in Spain, which has exactly the same setup, but again, is measuring English learners. And lastly, we're going to examine the keystroke data. Any questions?
How were the individual llama tests structured?
Okay, so that's, yes, the llamas. The llama tests are very interesting because, as I said earlier, they're sort of made of silly made-up words. I've tried the llama tests myself. Llama D and Llama B are specifically checking for word recognition. Llama D is checking specifically audio word recognition. So, you'll run through the test and, you'll hear a word using sounds that you might not recognize, and then they'll give you another word, and you'll have to determine whether or not that was a new word. Llama B is similar, but they give you a set of semi-logographic symbols, and you have to just remember all of those. Llama E is about orthographic recognition, essentially. So they'll give you a series of Latin characters, numbers, and they'll tell you this is an orthography that you have to memorize. And then they'll test you on it. And Llama Test F was about grammatical rule acquisition. So they'll give you a set of pictures, and then you'll have to infer grammar based off of those pictures and a set of words. And yeah, so it's a hard set of tests. A lot of participants didn't do so well at it.